and welcome to the Big Bear Homestead. Have you ever had a meal that you needed something quick, something that you needed for finger foods, or something that you just needed for the kids to be able to put together so you didn't have to do dinner? Well, this is the recipe for you. So, I'm sure you're wondering what this wonderful recipe is. Today, we're going to cook Forget It Nachos. Now, let me tell you a little bit of history behind this recipe. When I was younger, my mom never taught me how to cook. I always had stuff made for me or we ate out. Well, when I went and moved off and went to college, I didn't know how to cook for myself. And even the first year, I lived with my grandmother. So all I had to do was go to the mess hall or go down to eat at the cafeteria at school, or my grandmother would make food for me. Well, my sophomore year, I moved out and I had to start cooking for myself. And it was very nerve-wracking because I would spend my hard-earned money from working to go buy food. And it's one thing to buy stuff where you go out to eat, but it's another when you have to actually buy all the ingredients, because I started to realize ground beef was expensive, chicken breasts were expensive, everything was so expensive, and I kept feeling the pressure of cooking something and not liking it, not being able to eat it. So I started off very slowly by buying box dinners, so Hamburger Helper, things like that. Well, I stepped up, and one night I was going through the grocery store and I found a Taco Bell meal that had nachos. So I was like, oh, I can do that, no big deal. So I brought the box home and I started to cook it. Well, got a little bit ahead of myself and I didn't read the directions. And thus, Forget It Nachos was born. Okay, so let's talk ingredients. There's not a whole lot of ingredients to this recipe, but I will tell you that I've made a deviation from the original recipe. You'll see that there's no box over here, so we don't have any directions to follow. And that's good because I'm really not good at doing that, only when I bake. So as far as ingredients go, real simple. First thing you need is 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of ground beef. You're going to need a medium-sized onion that you'll dice up and we'll put in the frying pan, but you'll see that in a minute. Now here's where the recipe deviates a little bit. In the original recipe, it calls for a packet of taco seasoning to be put in with the ground beef. Well, it was down in the bottom of the box, didn't see it, didn't use it. I will tell you from the way that I've made the recipe in future, when I made it, you don't need it, because I tweaked a couple of things, and so you'll see here in a little while why we don't need it. But if you'd like to, you can use that. It's not going to hurt anything. The other thing you're going to need is diced green tomatoes with chilies. And you can either use mild or medium or hot, whichever one you like as far as spice goes. Refried beans, yum. Gotta have that protein in there. And you'll have sour cream. And you'll also need some Velveeta. Off-brand is the processed cheese spread or whatever. Remember, this isn't something that's healthy, this is something that's fast. And then you're obviously gonna need your nacho chips to be able to dip. Now, the thing that I really like about this recipe is that the day after or the next morning or whatever the case, this filling, you've run out of chips. Now what do you do with it? Well, if you have tortillas, you can use the leftovers as a burrito stuffing. You just put it in your tortilla, wrap it up, heat it up, and it's good to go. Now, another thing that you don't see here, but we will add later just to make it extra cheesy, is some shredded cheddar. You can always put that on top and dress it up that way as well. So let's get to cooking. Okay, so first step, go ahead and preheat your pan, put a little bit of oil in it. We're gonna put it on just probably low, just to kind of keep the pan hot and melt that oil just a little bit. We'll put that in there. And then we're gonna go ahead and dice up the onion. Now, go ahead and put those in your pan. And I always like to put the onions in first, kind of let them get a little bit soft before I put the ground beef in. Just spread those out and let them lightly cook until they get soft. Okay, now as you can tell by my eyes, the onions are cooking pretty good. They're about done, so I'm gonna go ahead and take them out of the pan. Some people like to cook their meat in with their onions, some people don't. I'm going to do, just for the sake of argument, so that I don't have people in the comments saying, oh my gosh, you shouldn't cook your meat with your onions. I'm gonna go ahead and take the onions out. We'll brown the beef, drain it, and then we'll put everything back together again. Okay. All right, so let's get the ground beef. We'll put it in. Now, of course, you're gonna hear that cooking pretty good too. Let's get a spatula for that. And all you're gonna do is just brown your beef until it's thoroughly cooked. Okay, so it looks like the ground beef is brown. Next step will be to drain it, which of course I'm not gonna bother you with, so you don't have to watch that. But then we'll go on and move on to the next step. Okay, so this is the part where I said, forget it, and Forget It Nachos was done. Go ahead and put your onions back into your pan with your ground beef. And this is where you would have originally put in the taco seasoning, but we all know how that story ended. The next thing you'll do is go ahead and put in your diced tomatoes. Now, in the original recipe, it had, and with this, you'll go ahead and use the juice as well. Put it all in there. So I just put the whole can in, and we'll just stir that up. Now, in the original recipe, in the box, they didn't have the diced tomatoes, and they obviously didn't have a block of cheese in the box. What they had was a pouch of like nacho cheese that you get kind of like a cheese dip. And then they also had a packet of salsa. So if you have these things lying around and you want to just mix it all together, you can do that instead. But over the years, I've just found that I like the consistency more when I can control how many tomatoes are in there, how much liquid's in there, and then also how much cheese is in there. This isn't a recipe that has perfect proportions. This is more going to be about what it looks like to you. Does it look runny? If it's runny, you're going to add some more beans or less tomatoes next time. So let's just go ahead and start mixing this together, and then we'll add the beans and the cheese. Now, once it's thoroughly warmed through, while we're waiting on that, I'm gonna go ahead and cut up our cheese. And you know, this is a 2-pound block, and this is just the off-brand. It doesn't have to be Velveeta. And what I've always done with this is I know that this big block is 2 pounds. So I cut it in half, and that's a pound, and then I cut it again in half to make a 1/2 pound. So I'm only going to use a 1/2 pound at first. We'll mix that together and see what the consistency looks like. Now, you don't want to put this whole block in just by itself. So what I normally do is I cut it up into pieces, and I just spread it out so it will melt more evenly and spread more evenly. So I'll cut it into a couple of slices, and then I'll cut those into cubes. All right, and then we'll add those in, spread them around, and we'll let that melt. Okay, so we added a little bit more cheese because we like a lot of cheese with our nachos. So if you look at the consistency, you'll see this is the way it looks. It should look like a runny cheese nacho kind of contraption mixture thingy. So the next thing that you're gonna do, and this is where the refried beans come in, if you add the refried beans, that'll help thicken it up and it'll have a little bit of substance to it. So, go ahead. Of course, I don't have my spatula, so I'm gonna do a no-no and use my knife, but it's okay. They need to be sharpened anyway. So you're gonna put all of your beans in there. Okay. Just stir that up in there. And that'll give it more of a thicker consistency. Now, basically all you're gonna do at this point is you're going to heat it through so that obviously you don't get a cold piece of refried bean in there. You mix it all together, and then we like to garnish with sour cream and also some shredded cheese. You can also garnish with avocado, but because of the season we're in right now, it's not very affordable to buy avocado. It's like $1.50 for one little avocado. So in the summertime, if you decide to do this, that would be a really good option. You could put some avocado slices on it as well. Okay, so we're just about done. I let the mixture sit on simmer for a little while to kind of cook down a little bit of the juices and kind of get everything to kind of melt together. And once that's done, it's kind of going to look almost like a soup, like a queso, I guess, a queso mix. And so what you'll do, just grab you some chips. Add you a little bit of mixture on there. And then we like to put a little bit of cheese on top. And it almost looks like refried beans, but I'll tell you, when you dip into it, it is fantastic. And then we'll put a little bit of sour cream on top. And like I said before, if you had avocado is really good with it. We'll just put a little bit of sour cream in there. And now it's ready for my husband and for my kids. Okay, so as you can see, this is really easy to make. The ingredients are fairly cheap, and you can make a lot for a lot of people. If it's finger food, you've got plenty for like a church gathering or Christmas party, whatever. But it's also quick and easy, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to do, and you don't have to follow any directions. So I'm glad you guys came by to cook with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, have a nice day. Okay, let's talk ingredients. This recipe is fairly simple. There's not too many ingredients. There's not a whole lot of instructions because I didn't read them the first time. So the very first thing you're going to need is ground beef. You're going to need about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds. And then you'll need a medium-sized onion that you'll dice up, and then we're going to fry those in the pan. Then you're going to need, apparently somebody is thirsty. And it's not me that's thirsty, it's the dog, because he's lapping up water in the background. You would not believe how loud it is in here. We kick the daughter out, tell her to go into the bedroom, watch TV, and then the dog's going, Apollo,